Hi there. Welcome to Good News about the world falling apart. My name is Ananda Forrest, and this channel is devoted to finding the good news about the world falling apart. And the core idea for it came from my most recent book, Good News About the World Falling Apart, the Third Turning of Human Consciousness. So if we're looking at the third turning, what does that mean? What were the first and second turnings? And that's what I'd like to talk about today. The first turning is basically when Homo sapiens appeared. Homo sapiens, from the Latin for one who knows or wise person, first showed up in Africa about 200,000 or 300,000 years ago. And their signifying features, their unique qualities that no other animals had, were fire and language. Now, fire is fairly easy to identify. Archaeologists can discover it. They can use carbon dating to pinpoint the date. And although various types of hominids, all the way back to Homo erectus 1 million years ago, had been fooling around with fire, regular, controlled use of fire to cook and protect didn't really seem to show up until about 200,000 or 300,000 years ago. And that's when Homo sapiens first shows up. And again, you got to ask yourself, what was it about fire? No other animal fools around with fire. Most animals, when they experience it in the wild from a lightning strike or maybe from a volcano, they run from it. They're terrified. Everybody flees from a forest fire or a brush fire, right? So what is it about Homo sapiens that gave them the idea that this would be a safe thing to fool around with? Because again, fire is kind of a bipolar energy source, right? It can be really hard to get going. If you ever read To Build a Fire by Jack London, about this guy trying to build a fire while he's freezing to death in Alaska, spoiler alert, he fails and he dies. So it can be life-threatening if you can't get it going. And on the flip side, it can get out of control really easily, right? Ever had fire get out of control? I lost control of it once in the woods in New England, and it grew at an exponential rate, bigger and bigger, faster and faster, terrifying. And what enabled me to overcome that out of control fire? If I'd been all by myself, I would have lost the battle and it would have taken over the woods. But I had a couple of friends, and by using language, by using instructions, by sharing ideas back and forth, because none of us were trained in wildfire fighting, we realized that you couldn't put it out with a fire extinguisher or water, but if you could rake the leaves away from the burning perimeter, which was growing, if you could rake the leaves all the way around, you could starve the fire. And so by communicating and innovating on the fly and using rakes, we got the fire under control in about half an hour and didn't burn the forest down and didn't have to call the fire department. So that's where language and fire really go well together, kind of like chocolate and peanut butter. Each one of them is fine on their own. But the tricky thing, of course, two questions. How do we know when language started, and why did humans think fire was such a great idea? Well, the first clue, of course, is the result of a forest fire. A lot of animals don't get away, and you can smell them. And for most of us, it's a wonderful smell, right? Who doesn't like meat? Well, a lot of people don't, but many of us love meat cooked over an open fire. So that would have been our introduction to the amazing qualities of fire. It can make your food taste so much better. The other thing is fire scares all animals. And although we were smart and we had spears before we had fire, mostly we'd go in a cave or up in a tree to sleep at night. And the problem is that's when the big cats came out. Right? Lions and leopards. And archaeologists have been finding a long time that a leading cause of death for early hominids was big cat related. And you can tell because there's 4 puncture wounds in the skull. Because we'd climb up in the trees to go to sleep, or our ancestors would, and they would climb up. And of course their paws were busy climbing, so they would use their immense jaws to grab a hold of one of our skulls and pull us out of the tree. I mean, can you imagine how terrifying that would have been? Not just for the person who was dying, but what about the countless generations that our ancestors would go to sleep at night and never know who was going to be with them in the morning? That's terrifying. It wasn't the leading cause of death. Probably tooth decay killed more people than big cats, but it would have been predominant for its trauma and terror. In a lot of ways, a small child's fear of the dark isn't just a little kid's weirdness. That's epigenetic, right? That's cellular memory of one of our first repeating traumas. And that would have been a huge motivator to learn to work with fire, as dangerous as it might be, because if you could get a fire going under that tree and have somebody watching that fire, you'd see the glint of the big cat's eyes as they approached, and you could build the fire up, you could call people down, you could light sticks on fire, burning brands, you could chase the cats away. Fire leveled the playing field. Now, of course, fire is also incredibly dangerous. I mentioned its bipolar qualities, and that would have been an immense incentive to improve forms of communication. Instead of just grunts and gestures, we would have begun to use abstract sounds, sounds that describe things that happened in the past, and applying them to events that might occur in the future. You can't do that with grunts and gestures. Animal communication is pretty much time-bound. It's relevant in the moment. Working with fire, you have to have a really good memory of what fire has done and could do, and you need to have an ability to imagine what it might do in the future, and you need to be able to communicate with other people to make that work in a safe way. And the other thing fire did is it extended our days. Most diurnal animals, great apes included, us included, go to sleep when the sun sets, right? It's dark, there's nothing to do, let's go to sleep. When you have fire, you can stay up all night. Fire extended our days. And what do we love to do when we're sitting around the fire? We love to talk. You can't do that much. I mean, you could work on tools, I suppose, but it would have been an incredible laboratory for developing language. And again, we don't know, because archaeology tells us clearly when fire started being worked with regularly. But language, of course, the first archaeological evidence of language, written language, comes from about 5,000 years ago, the beginning of the Mayan calendar. Homo sapiens were around and speaking for hundreds of thousands of years before that. So fire and language, once you have those two, you have superpowers. You have powers that no other animal has. I love the Huichol people in central Mexico. Their word for fire is tatewari, the oldest grandfather or the first shaman. And really, fire and language that's what shamans do, right? They imagine things that don't exist. They use their intuition and they create things out of thin air. In those wonderful interviews with Bill Moyers and Joseph Campbell, when Bill Moyers asked Joseph Campbell, "So Joe, who are the shamans today?" Campbell didn't pause. He said artists. And what do artists do? They make stuff up that wasn't there before. They use their imagination. They use inspiration. They're filled with spirit. They use their intuition, and they create things that didn't exist before that can affect our consciousness, that can affect how we see and perceive and act. So truly, fire and language are the origins of shamanism, which is really the origins of being a human being. And the interesting thing, the word shaman comes from a Tungus word, that's a tribe in Siberia, saman, which means wise person or one who knows. Interesting, that's what homo sapiens means, wise person or one who knows. Shaman is another word for human being. And this is a crucial part of our good news, because we carry within us the superpowers of imagination, intuition, inspiration. And if we use them skillfully for the benefit of our community, including nature, we can transform our world. As psychologist Carolyn Casey said, the imagination lays the rails for the reality train to go down. So the big jam up that we seem to be in now is the failure of imagination. People are just imagining the same thing over and over again. And of course, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.